a thread on the Factory 5 forum called the 818 Body Fitting Thread. Sure wish I'd read that before I got started. So basically, after reading that thread, where I left off last week was the body wasn't fitting so great. The side panels and the tail panel fit together fine, but this here wasn't fitting great, and I couldn't get the door installed. And so after reading, I think I mentioned this, you really got to get this installed to make sure your quarters are exactly where they need to be before you try the door. Now, I think really the best thing out there is to not do the doors until the very last. So if you're doing a Roadster, side panels first, then the deck lid and the engine cover, then the fenders, nose, and hood, and then come back and do the doors last. But I'm not going to do that because I'm going to be making major modifications up on the front end, and so I'm not going to worry about trying to make any of that fit what's in the back. So hopefully this whole video is dedicated to getting the back half of the body fit, and it's useful to somebody who doesn't go read the body fitting thread like I did. So one of the first things the thread says is put down the drill and pick up the clamps. Don't drill anything until you have everything where you want it, because every time you shift one thing, it affects something else. So all the body panel bolts are out. There is not a single body panel bolted on the car, and everything is done with clamps. I went to Harbor Freight today and picked up a dozen clamps. So the next thing was this 5/8 measurement at the front. The forum says to consider that a starting point. 5/8 or more, depending on how you want everything to fit and look. So, you know, a lot of people push it back to get the rear wheel centered in the housing, because at 5/8 the rear wheel sits closer to the front than the back, so it's not centered in the wheel well. Other reasons you might want to push it back are to help the fit of the engine cover, because if you don't, it gets up real tight against the roll bar and you have to start trimming it. May have to trim it anyway, but it helps, less trimming. So I have decided that that's the route I want to go. Since I'm going to be modifying a lot of stuff anyway, I decided I was going to go a way that was going to give me the best aesthetics. So instead of 5/8, I'm now at 7/8 on both sides, measured with a caliper. You can see I pulled the front wheels off so that I'd have lots of room to get up in here and measure. I set the frame exactly at ride height on some blocks, some rubber jacking blocks, and so I'm now at 7/8 on both sides. That centers the wheel up in the wheel well. Also gives me more room to work with this. So both side panels are clamped down at 7/8, and I've made sure they're rolled up under good. Next is the tail panel. So the keys there are to line up this body line, and this body line. Mine were already lined up really well, but I've still got them unbolted just in case I need to shift things. After you get those set, the engine cover comes on. Now, one of the things that was bothering me yesterday was that the engine cover seemed to be an inch too wide on each side. It turns out that this engine cover has a curvature to it that kind of follows a roll bar. But it likes to lay flat, especially if it got stored flat. Now, I stored it vertical, but I don't know what the previous owner did. But even if it's stored properly, it likes to relax. So basically, you just have to push it down in here, and that will force it to, when you push the edges in, it forces it to bow. So I've got it lined up perfectly at the front here, pushed in and clamped. Now, if it sits too high, you can sand down the return lip, but the forum says don't do that until you've got your door on, because you need it to match the door. And just leave it high here if you have to. Now, I won't leave it high here. I'll match it to the door, and then I'll modify this line here so that it looks good. If I have to leave it this high for the door, I'm not going to leave that lip looking like that. That looks like a kit car. So I will get all that corner to come together smooth once the door's on. Next comes the trunk or deck lid. That goes on. It too needs a bit of a bow, so you have to kind of force it down, and since I've got my taillights in at the moment, I couldn't get a clamp here. So it's taped. You force it down and that gives it some bow. And then you clamp the engine cover to the deck lid to help get the bow into the engine cover. Now I think, you know, this gap here, some of it's probably natural and some of it's probably because I moved the side panels back, but that's not a big deal. We can build up the lip of the deck lid. That's real easy to just extend that with some fiberglass on the end and then come back and get a nice return line on there. Here, you know, it's tight on this side and loose on this side, so either my deck lid's this way or my engine cover's this way. Engine cover can't really go one way or the other. I mean, it's pinned in pretty good on both sides. So the deck lid probably needs to move this way, which means I may need to just be bumping the tail panel over, but it's not something I can do with one person because everything starts to shift on you. So I'm gonna have a helper. And then the last thing you worry about is the fenders, which are really, you can see I've got a really wide gap here. This comes last because this gets fixed in position, and then that gets fixed in position by the tail panel, and then the fender's got some flex, and so you push them in, and then there's a plate under here that you mount them to. There's actually a forum vendor that sells basically a turnbuckle that you bolt here and here, and then you can spin it clockwise or counterclockwise to pull them in or push them out. I'm probably going to build something like that this week so that I can pull the fenders in or push them out to get my gaps just where I want them. So after that, I'll be able to fit the doors, and I'll probably have to modify the striker bracket because I already couldn't get it where I wanted it far enough to the back, and now I've moved another 0.2 inches from 5/8 to 7/8, so not a full quarter. Yeah, it's a full quarter. I moved another 1/4 inch back, so I'm definitely going to have to modify either the striker plate or the plate here that it bolts to. I'll have to elongate those holes a little more. So that's what I'm going to be working on. I think the next thing, until I can get a helper, is probably to build the turnbuckle that goes across there. So that's probably what I'll do tomorrow evening if I get a little time in the shop. So what I want to try to do this morning is make the brace / turnbuckle to kind of pull the fenders in or out. I then actually went and bought a turnbuckle that I was going to cut in half and weld onto a piece of rod and make something really nice that would work and look cool. But then I got to thinking that I don't know if I'd be able to keep it because I'm going to be modifying the deck lid and the trunk and all that pretty significantly for my target top. So I decided rather than spending a lot of time making something that I might not get to keep or throw away, I'd try to repurpose something that I already have. So initially I looked at my shifter linkage because it had rod ends on each end. And so that would have worked. It wouldn't have been a turnbuckle. I'd have had to have unbolted it, twisted it, and bolted it back together, but it would have worked. It was a little short, so I was going to have to make the brackets longer than I wanted. But then I got to looking, and I've got this, which is a turnbuckle. It does have a left hand and a right hand thread in on it. It's obviously massively overkill for some fenders. This used to be it used to bolt right here to there. This was for, it's a harness bar if you were going to use 4 or 5 point harnesses, which I'm not using because I have street belts. But since I really just want something temporary to help me get the body fitted, and then once I'm finished with the back area here, I'll design something that looks nice and proper, that works well with everything I've got. So I'm just going to cut some strips of metal that'll bolt onto the end here, and I can stretch this between the two fenders, and we'll get these fenders spaced properly and get some holes drilled and get it all bolted in place and get the whole body snugged down so that I can move on to the doors. So that's what I'm going to do this morning. Okay, it's ugly, but it's there. I completely misdrilled this one, so I'll have to go back and re-drill that, but I probably have to remake the whole thing anyway. This is just to help me get everything dialed in for now. So, twist one way, it gets larger, twist the other way, it gets smaller. Right now I'm getting smaller, it's pulling it in closer, so I have to lay the engine cover up here and then dial it in, so that's what I'm about to do. Okay, I got the deck lid on and I clamped it at the front, right where I want it to meet, on both sides. Now it's sitting very proud, it's very tall, but that can be trimmed down. I'm not worried about that at the moment. What I'm worried about is side to side. So before I had over 1 inch of gap on each side, and now as you can see that I've turned that turnbuckle in, I've got a very nice gap on both sides. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tighten down the fenders to make sure, or the tailpiece where it meets the quarters, so that I'm sure that the back end's not going to shift. I know the front end's not going to shift, and then I'll be able to lift this away, and I can't lift it up high enough with it clamped. There's a piece that goes over the shock towers right here that you're supposed to drill and bolt, and that holds the back end in place. So it's just a little snug on the corners, but it looks pretty good going down the side, and so I can trim this. I'm actually going to wind up, I think, taking this piece and bonding it to the other piece, and then cutting it across this way so that the center lifts up and the edges stay as part of making my target top. But for now, I need to get this fender bolted to the shock tower so that the quarters and the side pods are completely set, and then I can get back to work on my doors. All right, well, I put the bolts in above the shock towers, and that bar is out now, and I've still got a really nice gap, so it's holding in place like it's supposed to. So the next thing the manual would have you do is put the deck lid on and put all your bolts and supports and hinges together for this whole section, but because I'm modifying it all to make a target top, that's not going to happen. The next thing that's going to happen for me is the doors and that stupid bracket that won't line up. I'm going to get the door and the hinges on, and the latch and striker, and get that all lined up, so that I can then get the window installed and see exactly what kind of work I've got to do here to make a sealing surface for the window, and then start looking at how I'm going to modify this whole area here to meet up with the window. Time to get this lid out of the way and start working on find all my hinge stuff from where I was working on that last week and get started on that. Well, I had to slot these two holes here to get the bracket back far enough, but it is finally right there. It's at the right angle. It's flush both this way and this way. So now I can mark my slots, put my striker on, put my door back on, and start getting to adjusting where everything fits properly. Alright, I got the striker in. I shined a light from the back side so that I could see exactly where the slots in the bracket were. I traced them with a Sharpie, and then I dremeled them out using a little router bit on the Dremel. And then I put the striker on, and it's got adjustability about 1.5 inches side to side. I'm about in the middle right now. Yeah, a little to the outside. But the problem is it lines up perfectly up and down. bites right where it's supposed to. The problem is that it's not sticking far enough out to actually latch. And so I'm already all the way to the back on these. This is probably because I slid the body back. I knew that was going to cause some issues. As a reminder, I slid the body back to get the rear wheel in the center of the wheel well. So my options are to either slot that, put a spacer in between the striker and the body, or make a taller striker. And I think what I am going to do for the moment is put a spacer under the striker and then start fitting the door, and then once I've got the door in place, see how it fits and decide whether I want the door coming any further back or if I'm happy with the door where it is, and I just need to make a longer striker. But for testing purposes, I'm just going to put some shims under that striker so that it sticks out a little bit. The door opens and closes, but it's definitely not pretty. A spacer is definitely not going to be an option because that's how much space I need to get that properly latching. There we go. Just need to work on some kind of spring or something in there. So, that's not bad. If I don't wind up slotting these holes and sliding the door back, then what I'll have to do is I'll have to make a taller striker, because obviously I can't have 5/8 spacer in there. It would look like garbage. But now what I'm going to do is go get the door shell out and kind of see how it fits on here. Alright, I've got the door skin on. 4 hotel cards is 3/16 of an inch, which is the recommended gap. And as we can see here, I've got, I measured that, took a stack of hotel cards and slid it up in there until it was tight, and then measured it. 3/8 of an inch gap between the latch and the door skin, which is about exactly how much of a spacer I was putting on my latch to make it work. So what that means is that I've got to get the door frame to come back towards the back of the car more. I'm as far forwards as I can go in those slots. So I got to take the door back off and see if I have 3/8 of an inch that I can slide, that I can slot them further, or I've got to do something else creative, like maybe put some spacers between the hinges and the frame and use longer bolts. So yeah, fix and take a look and see. I definitely can't get 3/8 of an inch there. I mean, I would basically have to cut them all the way out and it'd be barely sticking onto the end, which doesn't seem real secure. So probably what I'm going to look at doing is making a spacer that's 3/8 of an inch that I can put there and there to make the frame further from the hinge. And then I'll have to find longer hardware to hold it all together. I had a spare piece of 1/2 inch aluminum. I needed a minimum of a 3/8 spacer because I was all the way at the end of my slots. If I put more than a 3/8, that would just allow me to come back some into my slots, which is probably good. It gives me a little more adjustability. So I just cut something out real quick on the grinder. These divots here actually were already in the metal from another project, and I decided not to clean them up, at least not yet. These spacers aren't overly pretty, but they work. And everything here's got to come back apart to get cleaned up, painted, powder coated, everything else once I'm done with all my modifications. So get the job done for now. I'm going to take it over there and put it on the car and let's see how it looks. Door back on here, gapped it 3/16 of an inch all the way around. It's sitting too far inboard on the back side, but I can't find a good way to hold it out on both ends at the same time. So right now I've just got it set like I need it on the latch end, and I've traced out where I need to trim it. so that I can go ahead and cut it and then reinstall everything. Actually, I need to go ahead and mark those 3 holes as well. So I'll do that, mark those 3 holes. I'm going to pull the skin off, trim it, drill it, and put it on here, and I'll screw it in here on the latch end. And then I will put the striker on and make sure it opens and closes well, and then I'll worry about the other end. I don't know if it seems like it watching the video, but you know, I've been working on this door for about 6 hours, and I'm still not there, but that's okay. This is one of the certainly most fiddly aspects of putting a car together, is getting the doors set, and even on a production car it can kick your butt. I spent days on the Mustang, so this isn't even a production car. So where I'm at now, I drilled the 3 holes right here that melt the striker through the fiberglass, and it turns out that was a poor idea. I shouldn't have done that yet, so I'm gonna have to slot them, and I'm gonna have to slot those, and I'm gonna open up where the striker goes through, because I've got these nice little plates that'll cover it and make it look clean. So I'm gonna go ahead and open that up, and I'm gonna slot those, and then you can see there's a thick piece on the fiberglass right there, and what that's causing is when I tighten down here, it's causing it to bulge down here. So I'm gonna have to take the shell off and sand that back to a consistent profile, get rid of that bulge, slot those 3 holes for the strikers, and then go at it again. But that's gonna have to be tomorrow, because I'm out of time for today. I'm continuing to chip away on the doors. I'm at the point now to where I've drilled so many holes here where the latch and the pins go that I can't drill anymore to get it right. I've already slotted and drilled, and it's a mess. So I'm gonna fill all this up with some peanut butter and start from scratch, which means I'm probably sunk on the doors for the day. By the time I put this on, it probably won't cure in time to get another shot at it. So I'll find something else to work on while this cures, but I think this is definitely the answer. Just now to know a little bit more about what I'm doing, fill all this up and start from scratch. Okay, well, it turns out that, you know, once you've got a little practice and you know what you're doing, you can fit the door in a few hours. I came out this morning and sanded off the peanut butter that I had put on to close up all the holes, put a little lightweight body filler on it just to smooth things, sanded that off, and got back to fitting the doors. So with the spacers already made and basically no holes in the door shell, what I did was I took the latch loose and just latched it to the striker, and then set the door frame up and slid it around the latch, and then came back to this end and put my hinges in, so I mostly had up to down and in and out. Then I came back and slid the door shell on and used all of the hotel cards to get my gap right where I wanted it. And then I marked this top hole right here and drilled it and set it. And then I put the whole thing back on, and I came up here and I got the door to match up to the body line here. Used some duct tape from here to here to hold it in place. Marked those inside holes. Took the whole thing off, put one of those bolts in, put this one back on, and then I came back and I aligned the lower corner here, and then marked that hole there and drilled it through. And then I kind of had 3 corners, so I got all those tightened down. Then I drilled the 3 holes to mount the latch to the door itself, installed it on the door, got the door open and closing where I wanted it to, and then I came back and did this top corner very last. And then the very last thing I had to do was adjust it in and out just a little bit by moving the striker out. You can see how much I will end up moving the striker to get my body line flush here. It's shallow here, but that's the door. The curvature of the door doesn't match the side panel, and I think it's on purpose. I think it's because of the way the engine cover sits on here, but I'll be reworking that entire corner anyway. So really happy with this door. It opens and closes smoothly. No scuffing, dragging, just perfect. So I'm gonna see if I can get the other side done. If you remember from the last video, or maybe early in this video, I think one of the hinges for this side is bent. I'm not 100% positive. It could have just been an optical illusion because it was so dirty. I've had them soaking in PB Blaster, so they actually move now. I'm going to get those out, get those cleaned up, and see if they're usable. If they're usable, I'm going to go do the passenger's door before I forget what I've learned. If they're not usable, then I'm going to start on the window on the driver's door. On the passenger side, I did have to slot this as well for the striker bracket, but not nearly as much as I did the other side. The other side I had to slot about an extra 3/8 of an inch. This side I only had to slot about 1/4 of an inch. So I got that taken care of. Striker's in there nice and tight, right in the middle of its adjustment point. So we're trying to get the frame to fit, and then once the frame fits, move on to the fiberglass shell. I'm plugging away on the passenger's door. These are the rear hinges instead of the front hinges. They do bolt up with no problems, and they appear to swing smoothly, and everything appears to be okay except for I'm too low, and so I've got to be able to raise the frame up. I didn't have that problem on this side, and so I don't know if it is. It could be one of three things. One, it could certainly be that I'm using the wrong hinges. They could have just a slight different angle to them, possibly, although visually everything looks the same. The second thing is possibly it's a hand-built chassis. One side's just off a little bit from the other. That's very possible. The third thing it could be is that I'm using 5/16 hardware there, and I'm using 3/8 hardware here. I intend to upgrade to 3/8 over there. I just didn't have it at the time, which basically means I'm getting an extra 1/8 of an inch adjustability on that side that I don't get on this side. But I think I need more than an 1/8, although there's a high probability I'll have to make a little adjustment there when I go to 3/8 hardware, because I am at the limits of adjustability on that side. So what I've done here was I decided to slot the frame that already had up and down adjustment in it. Any other modification would have been giving me adjustment in a point that I either didn't have adjustment or already have adjustment in a different direction. So this was already made for adjustment up and down, so I just slotted it an extra drill bit width, and I'm going to get it back on there and see if I can't get it adjusted up enough that I got clearance on the bottom here for the, or excuse me, that's the bottom there, so I'll be able to get the fiberglass shell in there, and then I'll start fitting the shell. The driver's door took probably 16, 18 hours. Passenger's door took about 4 or 5. As I mentioned, I had to slot the frame here to move the door up. I don't know for sure if that had to do with the fact that I used the wrong hinges, but it's working. What else did I have to do? I did have to slot these holes like on the other side, but not nearly as much. That's really it. Everything else, this door went together a lot easier because I knew what I was doing. Got a really nice body line here. It all lines up really well. That's great. Both doors are done. Now I can start on the power windows. And once I'm done with the power windows, I'll be able to move on to the target top. So I got to admit, it's coming together a little faster than I thought it would. But I'm not getting too excited about it because I know once I get into this target top, it's going to slow down. That may take me 3 or 4 months maybe more to figure out. So in the meantime, I've got messes all over the place and lots of little things I can work on in the evening. So appreciate you guys watching, and leave me a comment if you see I'm screwing something up or you want more information on something I'm doing. Thanks a lot, guys.